Namaskar. Team Hingori Sutra welcomes you to In Conversation with Mr. Kartik Vyas on Kleshas, the afflictions of the mind. As written in the book Guru Sutra, a guru is the sum of multiple personalities. He plays different roles while dealing with his disciples, devotees, and followers. It is not easy to switch roles from a guru to father to friend. Sometimes the disciple needs to the support of a father, and that role must be played by the guru spiritually. Today, on Father's Day, let's dedicate this session to our Guru, wishing him a happy Father's Day. And one of the most important things a Guru teaches us is to help us evolve spiritually, is to overcome the afflictions of the mind, the Kleshas. The Glaciers are known to be the root cause of pain and suffering. Sage Patanjali mentions the five Kleshas in Yoga Sutras: avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, responsible for all our sufferings in life. Only through proper understanding can we outgrow our intrinsic afflictions. We are born with these kleshas. The first step is to understand these kleshas and then putting in the effort to eliminate them. To help us understand these kleshas, we have with us Mr. Kartik Vyas. Mr. Kartik Vyas is the founder of Potentials Unlimited Mumbai. He is a certified coach, facilitator, trainer, speaker, and soon to be published author. He leads a team of dedicated, widely experienced trainers committed to the cause of engineering human excellence. Kartik Vyas is a professional certified coach accredited with the International Coach Federation, ICF. He specializes in neuroscience-based coaching for business leaders, entrepreneurs, high potential employees, teams, and individuals from the Neuro Leadership Institute, USA. He has 37 years of experience in executive coaching, leadership, facilitation, and training with corporate clients, including 141 Fortune 500 companies. Wow. He integrates wisdom from the fields of neuroscience, emotional intelligence, yoga psychology, leadership, and NLP into his coaching. Kartik ji, आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.
It's a pleasure having you with us today, sir. And we really look forward to this session, Understanding Kleshas.
Thank you once again. And let's dive in. When we look into ourselves and when we look around ourselves, is there pain in our lives? And you can answer this question to yourself with just a yes or a no. If we
I
look
see
into,
most of the answers coming in as yes.
okay, if we look into our past, has there been pain in our lives in the past? Again, a yes or a no.
Yes, again.
And if we look into our lives right now, is there pain in some area of life, some aspect of life or the other? A simple yes or a no will do it once again.
Yes, again.
Why is this experience of pain in our lives? And it is not that there is just the experience of pain. If we look into ourselves and if we look around ourselves, is there happiness also around? Once again, a simple yes or a no will do the trick.
It's yes again.
Right. Now comes a little difficult question. And as Shakespeare said, this above all, to thy own self be true. Be true to yourself when you answer my next question. And this next question is that imagine this weighing scale. On one side is pain, misery, suffering. Yeah, each of these is a little stronger word than the previous one. And on the other side, let's call it just happiness. Look into let's look into our lives as a whole till today. Just look within ourselves, and looking within ourselves, the question is, which side of the scale is heavier, the one which is the painful or the one that is the happyful? Yeah, write P for painful and H for happyful.
The focus is always on the painful.
So the painful, we seem to have a consensus over here, is bigger and larger, is more, is carrying more weight. And if this is what our experience is telling us, then I'm sure there is a deeper and a larger reason and purpose for it. So it is necessary to ask, or is it necessary to ask, why pain? Why suffering? Why misery? If life was just happiness and happiness, with not even a touch of pain, how would that life be? Wouldn't we call it wonderful? Or would we really call it wonderful? Is there a larger design behind why there seems to be lot more pain within us, around us, in our lives, all this while? And how many of us over here are spiritual aspirants? We wish to not just grow, but we wish to evolve. And we wish to not just evolve, but we wish to evolve and experience that what is truly spiritual. So, how many of us over here are on a spiritual journey? If you are on a spiritual journey, please type in the chat box or wherever you are a me. If you are a spiritual aspirant, type me.
Yes.
Yeah. So, approximately how many me's? Just give me a back of the envelope number, 10, 20, 30, 40.
No, they're just going on. So I'm sure at least 40 at the moment.
Okay, great. Super. So, if there are at least 40 and 50 of us, possibly more, who are on a spiritual journey, then what is the relevance, significance, and importance of pain as far as our spiritual journeys are concerned, as far as our spiritual evolvement is concerned. Are these questions worth understanding? Are these questions worth at least exploring? If you think that they are indeed worth exploring and understanding over the next 45, 50 minutes, please type in the chat box why. Why for yes.
Yes, they are.
Okay, super. In another context, Bill Gates said that success is a poor teacher. Success lulls us into complacency. And in success, there is really no growth. By and large, when an individual is successful, won't we say that there is happiness in life? So, if success is equal to happiness, but is perhaps not equal to evolvement, then what is real success? What is true success? What is genuine success? And what is success on the spiritual path? We all understand success in the material world and in material dimensions as winning something, being victorious, or gaining something. It can be money, it can be possessions, it can be position, it can be power, it can be status, it can be a goal that we have set for ourselves in the material world and we have achieved that goal. You set up your own company, a startup, so on and so forth. And if success is equal to happiness, but not necessarily evolvement, then is the opposite of success failure? Or is success on the spiritual journey take on a completely different meaning altogether, take on a completely different form and dimension altogether? And is it so that the greater our awareness of pain on the spiritual journey of life, the greater are the possibilities, the probability of success on the spiritual path? And you'll say, oof, oof, too many questions, isn't it? So let's keep all these questions aside and let's understand at the fundamental level what are these kleshas and why are they responsible for our pain. And in the introduction, as well as in perhaps the flyers that you have received, you have known the names of these five kleshas, the English as well as the original Sanskrit names. The names are known to us, the names, the words are familiar to us. But what is the connection of these kleshas to all these questions and issues that I have raised over the last few minutes, and the questions that you have answered? You and me, let's have this conversation today on the Glaciers. Shall we? Are you ready? And if you are completely here, completely present, completely ready, type in the chat box. I am R. I am ready. I am R.
Loads of thumbs up, IMR.
Ah, super. Great. Let's continue. The closest English word to the original Sanskrit word affliction, the original Sanskrit word klesh is this English word affliction. To afflict, what does it mean in English? Affliction is that which has the capacity, the capability to cause pain. These afflictions are also called structural defects. And when I use this term, structural defects, defects we all understand, it's like a weakness, a limitation. But if it is a structural defect, this is a defect in which structure or in what structure? And in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, we are told that these kleshas, these afflictions, plural afflictions because they are 5 in number, these afflictions are in the very structure of our mind. The yoga term for mind is chitta. In fact, the English word mind is nowhere close to chitta. The word chitta really cannot be translated. The founder of the Yoga Institute, Sri Yogendraji, used to call it personality complex. Yeah, the chitta is a complex. It is made up of different components or structures that make up the sum total of who we are, our entire personality, so to speak. So if these kleshas are in the very structure of our personality complex and they are therefore structural defects, in what part of this structure of the chitta are these defects? So listen carefully to what I am now going to say. These kleshas, these structural defects, these afflictions are in the chitta, our personality complex, at the subconscious level. Where are they hidden? In the subconscious. And since they are hidden in the subconscious, they are latent, lying below the surface. We don't necessarily see them, understand them. Forget working on them. Because working on them is going to be important, which we will see only towards the end of the session today. A little bit. Imagine the very lens of our eye, if it is colored. There was a time when colored contact lenses were the rage of the day. Perhaps some people use them even today. If the color of this lens through which I see the world, and if this is the lens covering my own inner eye, and if this lens is also colored, then how is my perception and understanding of the world going to be? I'm sure you will say color, won't you? Which means that if the color of this lens is yellow, then I will have a jaundiced view of things. And if the color of this lens is going to be green, then perhaps I'm going to be green with envy. And if the color of this lens is blue, then maybe I will be down in the blues. If the color of this lens is grayish, then perhaps my perceptions will be gloomy. What if the color of this lens is pink? Then everything would appear to be rosy. But is this the color of the external world, the external situation, the person, the events, the circumstances of my life, I, me, myself? We will say, of course not. The true color I am unable to see, because the very lens through which I see the world itself is colored. And therefore, I do not see events, situations, people, myself, life as it is, but colored because of the color of these lenses. The Kleshas are like these colored lenses. What are they doing? Not only causing us pain, taking us in the direction of misery, but these Kleshas are distorting everything. As long as I see the world through these colored lenses, I will see the world and understand the world and relate to the world in a distorted sense. There is, of course, a lot of deeper significance of the Kleshas. But for the moment, let's go further and examine each of these five Kleshas. The first Klesh that we have seen so far, just to bring you up to date with my slides, Kleshas are the defects in the human personality, and we have seen where in the human personality are these defects. In the chitta, the personality complex, or the mind, as we will loosely translate the word chitta. They are therefore the cause of all our biases and prejudices in life. And they emanate deep in the subconscious mind. The first Klesh is avidya. And let's translate avidya strictly as not ignorance, because avidya is not the absence of knowledge but presence of a knowledge that is opposite to real knowledge. So therefore let's call it wrong knowledge. Avidya, I repeat, is not a lack of knowledge, is not the absence of knowledge, but the presence of a certain kind of knowledge that we believe in, which is the opposite of right knowledge, right understanding. And if this is what avidya is, Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras, what does he tell us? That these kleshas, of which avidya is the first and the most important one, avidya is considered to be the breeding ground for the other four kleshas. So jokingly I say that avidya is the mother of all the kleshas. And this avidya takes four forms. What are these four forms that avidya takes? And these four forms of avidya are not simply philosophical propositions. They are realities. These are the four colored lenses of avidya through which we are going to see ourselves, people, situations, life itself. Ready? All right, let's go. Considering or believing that what is impermanent as permanent is the first dimension of avidya. Considering that what is anitya as nitya. By the way, if I use some of these Sanskrit terms, is it okay? And I'll try to use the bare minimum. Is it
That's
okay?
perfectly fine.
Okay,
Absolutely.
okay, great, super. We can do without these Sanskrit terms also, but let's use both. So, what is permanent in life? Why don't you type in the chat box? Let me see. What do you consider permanent in life? What is permanent in life?
We're just waiting for the replies.
Yes. What, according to you, is permanent in life or about life, about this universe of ours? What are your thoughts? Type in the chat box, please.
Permanent is soul. One of the answers is soul.
Mhm. Is there anything else that is permanent in life?
Change. Change is
Yeah,
permanent.
I usually get these two answers. Is there anything else that is permanent in life?
Somebody's written breath.
Breath
Yeah,
is permanent in life.
till death.
Till death, exactly.
There,
Permanent means eternal.
and there is an answer saying nothing is permanent.
Ah. And yet, in spite of this intellectual understanding, in spite of, let me call it, a theoretical understanding, we act and behave and function as if everything around us is permanent. Are our homes permanent? Is our money permanent? Is our bank balance permanent? Are our relationships permanent? Is this physical world, the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets, are they permanent? Our names, our positions, is this permanent in life? And yet, don't we chase them knowing very well that they are not permanent things in life? And mind you, I'm not saying that it is these things are wrong or bad. I'm not saying that. All I am saying is, at a deep, deep level, we consider and we function and act and behave as if all these things that are truly impermanent are permanent. What is really permanent, we'll get there, we'll arrive at it. And I'm sure the right answer has already come. In fact, it has already come. This is the first dimension of avidya. I believe, I consider, I think, I act, I function as if I put all my faith in that what is impermanent, not that what is permanent. The second dimension of avidya is believing, considering that what is impure as pure. Ashuchi as shuchi. And what does Patanjali consider as impure? And the consensus is that he is referring to the body. And why is the body impure? Now, when Patanjali wrote the Yoga Sutra somewhere 2,500 years back, which were only 195 sentences original in Sanskrit, a few hundred years later, people found it difficult to understand what did Patanjali really mean at deeper levels. So there was a need for a commentary. And a commentary could be written only by someone who was acknowledged and accepted as an authority on that subject, on that field in his times, accepted as an authority by his contemporaries. So the first commentator was Vyas. And incidentally, I share the same surname. Coincident. Coincidental. And it is this first commentator, Vyas, who in his comments on this sutra gives us half a dozen reasons why the body is impure. Two of them, let me talk about it. A synonym of impure is unclean, and pure is clean. So is the body clean or unclean, pure or impure? We have to keep the body clean. So essentially the body must be unclean and therefore impure, isn't it? We take a bath. At least in India, we take a bath every day. Perhaps not in the cold countries. But why do we take a bath? To clean the body. But in tropical climates like ours, as soon as we have just about finished our bathing, and as we start drying ourselves, and as soon as we may have finished drying our body, wiping the body clean of all the water, the body immediately starts sweating. And what is sweat? Perspiration. Is it a sign of cleanliness and purity, or impurity, a toxin? And does such kind of waste keep coming out of the body? And I'm not going to be very graphical about it, don't you worry. And yet, to such an unclean body, impure body, even if we have not taken a bath, we sweat and we stink. If we sweat more and if we haven't taken a bath. And sometimes we don't want to be stinking to people all around us. So what do we do? To camouflage that, we put perfumes, deodorants, and so on and so forth to project as if the body is clean and therefore pure. And at this rate, if I go further and give such examples, you are going to soon tell me that I am going to strike at the heart of the entire beauty and cosmetic and fashion industry, which constantly tries to project the beauty and the cleanliness and the purity of the body. Please understand that I am going to the spirit of it all and not just sticking to these words that are indicating these aspects of avidya with reference to pure and impure. Think about it. The third dimension of avidya. Here are our two friends. Believing, considering that what is dukkha as sukha, that what is misery as happiness. And it is over here that each one of us will need to do our own explorations. We will need to do our own explorations as to what we really think is true happiness and what indeed is this thing called happiness. But let me go further. The fourth dimension of avidya is believing and considering the non-self as the self. This fourth dimension of avidya takes us to the next klesh, which is asmita. Strictly speaking, asmita is identification. I am identified. I am identified with what? With practically everything around me. And look at the language that we use. This body, whose body it is, and we'll say my body. Whose hand is this? My hand. Whose head is this? My head. Whose eye is this? My eye. Whose mind is it? My mind. Whose intellect is it? My intellect. And the people around me, who are they? My parents, my spouse, my children. Whose money? My money. Do we see this? How deeply entrenched is this klesh called asmita? This I'm identified. I'm identified with all these material things. But I never say, I am the soul, I am the spirit, I am the drashta, I am the seer, I am consciousness. Do we believe, as someone once said, we need to realize that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. It is this asmita that therefore gives rise to I, me, and mine, and therefore we will call asmita also as the I sense in a way of speaking, or the ego. I think, I believe that myself is this mind of mine, is this intellect of mine. And there is nothing beyond this intellect or this mind. In fact, I sometimes I even think that there is no need for anything above and beyond the mind. I know nothing else apart from this mind, this chitta or this buddhi, this intellect of mine. And in fact, that is my real self. That's not the real self. The real self is this soul, is this Atma, is this spirit, the Drashta. And in yoga, it is called Purusha, consciousness. Sometimes even translated as pure consciousness. Remember the impure, pure bit? The believing the non-self as the self, considering that aspect of avidya converts itself into asmita, identification. I'm identified with everything. I'm identified with everything that I call I, me, and mine. And when anything happens to any of these things that I call I, me, and mine, there is going to be some pain, isn't it? This story of the Klesh goes further. It just doesn't stop over here. And let me quickly go over the other three Kleshas and then open up for Q&A if there are any. And I'm sure you must have some questions. So whatever I'm identified with, what happens to it? Whatever I'm identified with gives me some pleasure. And I now get attached to this pleasure. And this attachment is rag. Rag, the last A is silent. The last letter A is silent. What is rag? Attachment. Attachment to pleasure or the means of pleasure. And aren't we all attached to something or the other? Don't we have our likes? Rag will take some more forms. What are these forms that rag will take? We'll get into that in the next slide. Everything that I'm attached with everything that gives me pleasure. What happens if anything comes in the way of my pleasure seeking? Rag will then turn into dvesh. So before I go to dvesh, if the body gives me a sense of pleasure, I get attached to my body. If the achievements of my children gives me a sense of pleasure, I get attached to my children or my spouse. If money gives me a sense of pleasure, I get attached to my money. There's nothing wrong in having children or money or status or position, but it is this attachment. ये कमबख्त राग जो हो जाता है. And if anything comes in the way of this pleasure, what I'm going to experience is this fourth klesh, dvesh, aversion, hatred, jealousy. Both rag and dvesh will take many other forms. What are these forms that rag and dvesh will take? If they are really two sides of the same coin, where there is rag, there is dvesh. Where there is a like, there is also dislike. Where there is an attachment, there is also an aversion. Where there is attraction, there is also going to be, and if you guessed repulsion, you are right. We'll get into that. Greed is another form of rag. Or rag takes this form of greed or thirst for pleasure. The Sanskrit term that Vyas, the first commentator on the Yoga Sutra, uses is Trishna, thirst. Yeah. So if attraction is on one side, repulsion is on the opposite side. If rag takes the form of greed, dvesh will take the form of malice, ill will. It is also the anger that I have towards pain. So if rag follows the remembrance of pleasure, dvesh follows the remembrance of pain. And no wonder we don't like pain. Neuroscience today tells us that right in the very brain are the pleasure and the painful centers. And the natural tendency of the brain is to move towards pleasure and move away from pain. And that is how life is. We either move towards that what we think will give us happiness, and we move away from that what we think will give us pain. And we would like this cycle of pleasure and happiness to continue without the dvesh, wanting this status quo in life to continue, wanting life itself to continue as it is the last and the fifth Klesh called Abhinivesh. The love of life, the fear of death, the resistance to change. I want to cling on to life as it is. Though we say, and so many of you say, typed that change is permanent in life, and yet deep down we resist change. We don't welcome change. We don't embrace change. We fight. We resist change. Why? Because if, and look at these corona times, don't we experience all these Kleshas, including the fear of the losses, losing our near and dear ones, losing our very health, losing the vitality and the energy of our body. What is this if not change? And we fear. Abhinivesh, therefore, is the root of all our fears in life. And ultimately, it is the fear of death. It is the fear of losing this very sense of identity. That what I call I and me. These Glaciers operate in 5 degrees. When any Klesh is active, is dominating. Remember, when I'm angry, Dvesh is dominating. When I have fear, Abhinivesh is dominating. When a Klesh is in the dominating position, it is active, it is in full blown, I am under the grips of it, then the Klesh is active. Udar is the Sanskrit word that is used. Or I alternate, I swing between two Kleshas. Liking, disliking, attraction, repulsion, love, hate. Or the Klesh is dormant, like a dormant volcano, waiting to erupt, waiting for favorable circumstances and times. Every system of yoga, if we wish to progress on the spiritual path, it is these 5 kleshas that are coming in the way. It is these 5 kleshas that are keeping our chitta, our mind limited. And therefore, every single technique of yoga, directly or indirectly, when done correctly, when done in the right spirit, is designed to weaken the klesh. Every system of yoga, directly or indirectly, is designed to weaken the klesh. Doesn't matter we call it Hatha Yoga, doesn't matter we call it Bhakti Yoga, Raj Yoga, Mantra Yoga, Tantra Yoga, Laya Yoga, this yoga or that yoga. If it is really yoga, then it should weaken the kleshas. Then it is yoga, otherwise it is something else. And as the sadhak progresses in weakening the kleshas by the practice and the application of yoga, eventually the very seed of the klesh is going to be roasted or burned. And when the seed is roasted or literally burnt, we then step beyond this chitta, beyond this limited intellect of ours, and we experience this soul, the spirit, this drashta, this purusha, this consciousness in its fullest glory. And therefore, does yoga suggest that we directly attack the kleshas? No. Yoga says, let us do, and in fact, the entire work of yoga is on the opposite side. If the Klishta tendencies, the Klishta mindset, the Klishta way of functioning is creating pain, then to rise to a state of non-pain requires us to cultivate and work on developing the exact opposite, which is from the Klishta to the Aklishta. And how does that happen? From the Klishta to the Aklishta, let us therefore cultivate the opposite of the Klesha, the Aklishta kind of thoughts, and eventually create Aklishta mental habits. These Aklishta thoughts and mental habits and practices, what will they generate? Aklishta sanskaras, subconscious impressions. And that is why yoga is an education of the subconscious. The changes and the transformations that the aklishta practices of yoga create a harmonious shift at a subconscious level, and we will realize and recognize this only later on at the conscious level. And that is why these 5 kleshas are the root causes of all our problems and pains according to the psychology of yoga. Let me stop over here and open up for Q&A. And if we are to close at 10, maybe we will have just 7 minutes for Q&A if there are questions.
Thank you very much for making it so simple to understand, Kartik ji.
Most welcome.
There is just one question that comes to mind is if we go on to handling the ego, where it is the identity. So how would you suggest we break that one habit of identification?
Right. Where is our belief and faith? Is it in our mind and intellect and our intellectual capabilities? Or do we believe that the real evolvement of life is beyond this mind or intellect? And is it in the direction of the spirit and the soul and the consciousness? The more we journey in this direction, the more we are going to work on the identification. Remember, asmita over here is identification. That it reflects in egoistic behavior is more or less a byproduct. So therefore, if ego is responsible for egoistic behavior and egoistic thinking and egoistic way of functioning, and an egoistic way of functioning is believing that what I think and what I understand is the truth, is the ultimate reality. One practical way would be to cultivate and generate a sense of humility. Then we are working on the opposite of the egoistic way, which is the humble way or the humilistic way, to corrupt the English language. So becoming humble, having a faith in something larger than my own thinking, and cultivating ultimately a faith that there is a larger reality. And if I want to call that reality God, a higher power, then I am truly working at weakening the Asmita Klesh at multiple levels. Have I answered this question?
Yes, sir. Very. There's another question here, which is asked is, can you please expand on how yoga reduces Klesha Or, to combine another question is, what is the day-to-day technique to deal with these kleshas?
Remember, what did I say just a little while back? That every technique of yoga, in every system of yoga, is primarily designed to directly or indirectly work on and weaken the kleshas, provided it is done in the right spirit, with the right attitude. So, therefore, if we look at the classical eightfold path of yoga, it begins with yamas and certain restraints. If we look at each of those yamas, let's take just the first one, ahimsa. I practice ahimsa, I cultivate ahimsa, and I don't do hinsa in thought, word, and behavior. Why? Because this very tendency to hurt others, this very act of hurting others, is because I dislike something or I hate something, which is which klesh? Dvesh. So the more I am practicing ahimsa, I am actually working on this klesh called dvesh. And in the same way, each and every one of the five restraints, the five yamas, is weakening the klesh. Just as cultivating the five niyamas and the observances. For example, cleanliness, shaucha, physical cleanliness as well as mental cleanliness, purity. Cleansing the mind of our kleshas is itself cultivating an aklishta tendency. Or santosh, contentment. I put in my best, I put in all my efforts, and then whatever results I get, I am contented. But I strive to be better. I strive to grow, I strive to evolve. But whatever results I get, I am content. Each of the eightfold angas of this Ashtanga Yoga of Patanjali is designed to weaken the kleshas. Sitting in a meditative posture, which is asana, and simply watching the breath and training the mind to be calm, quiet, composed, balanced, and then maintaining that balanced state of mind even after I have discontinued the practice of this meditativeness on the mat itself means I have weakened the kleshas. And eventually, when from the yamas to the niyamas, from the asanas to the pranayam to the restraint and the control of the senses pratyahar, the moment I enter into the inner domain of the chitta in dharana, dhyan, and samadhi, I am directly working and weakening the kleshas. Bhakti Yoga does the same, surrendering ultimately to God, to a higher power, a superior power. And when even on the cross, I may say that not my will but thy will be done. God forgive them, for they know not what they do. Every system, every technique of yoga, directly or indirectly, is working on the kleshas. So all I will say is that if we are on the spiritual path and we have a spiritual master, then this spiritual master, our guru, has given us his or her guru mantra, his or her own meditative practice. Keep practicing and worry not of the result, because it will weaken the kleshas.
Thank you. Beautifully explained, sir. There was one more question: is how do we discriminate between kleshta and akleshta?
Simple. The exact opposite of klishta is aklishta. So if avidya is klishta, then what will be the opposite? Vidya. What is the real vidya?
Awareness.
What is the real vidya about this body of ours? What is the real vidya about this mind and intellect of ours? What is this real vidya about the soul, the spirit, this consciousness in us? The path of yoga and the path of spirituality is the path of gaining the right vidya through our practical experiences on this spiritual journey. So, at a simple level, the exact opposite, the exact antonym of each klesh is the aklesh. The opposite of the klishta is the aklishta. I can go deeper, but for want of time, I'm keeping my answers a little precise.
Right. Very appreciate that. Yeah. There was another question here saying that is there something that you can suggest where a person can go beyond Maya?
Okay, at the risk of creating a fight, uh, Maya comes from the word Maya comes from a different system or school of Indian thought or Indian philosophy. Be that as it may, that what is Maya, let's say that this Maya is the equivalent of what yoga says is avidya, or the Maya of this world of ours itself. What is the ultimate reality all about? Is the ultimate reality material and materialistic, or is the ultimate reality non materialistic or spiritual? This ability to gain this knowledge experientially, gain this realization, gain this sakshatkar, the ability to discriminate that this is the material and this is the non material, the spiritual, is in yoga and in the Yoga Sutras considered to be the highest knowledge. And when this highest knowledge, this highest viveka occurs, this highest ability to discriminate between the two happens, then we are knocking on the doorsteps of liberation. Mukti, moksha, Kaivalya as yoga calls it. Maybe it is the nirvana of the Buddhists.
Thank you. Thank you. And the last question for the evening is by Shwet. Shwet says, my dad has fear of death. How should he deal with it?
I'm sorry, my dad has the fear of death. Is that what? Death.
Yes. Yes.
How can you deal with it? I'm sorry,
He
you
deal
can't.
with it.
How can
Yeah.
he deal with it?
Yeah.
I don't know if it is your question or his question. Is it your problem or his problem? Is it your challenge or his challenge? Because you said my dad has this. If your dad has this, your dad needs to work on this. You can't do anything for your dad. And for that, he needs a spiritual master. He needs a guide. He needs a guru.
His problem is what Shwet says. So I think he typed it as his problem. So yeah, the answer here is Shwet, to follow a guru, a Siddh guru, who
Right.
can help with that.
Right. Yeah. And in today's day and age, to get a genuine guru is important. It was always important, but today it is perhaps more important because the the wild web www is full of gurus.
Absolutely. So true. So true. And on that note, Kartik ji, Hingori Sutras really appreciates and thank you for the time that you've spent and to beautifully explain the Kleshas to us tonight.
Thank you. Most welcome.
It was a
And
pleasure
it's near, yeah, and it's nearing my bedtime, and my eyes have already gone red. So thank you for thank you for inviting me. and thank all of you beautiful souls out there. If you feel that I can be of any help to you, please feel free to get in touch with me, and I'm sure you will be able to get my contact details. And I would be happy to help you if I can. And this offer is valid for this lifetime alone. Thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah. Mr. Karthik's details would be shared, the email ID and his website would be shared on our thing, on our chat right here. And dear audience, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure having you here. Good night, Shubh Ratri, Sayonara, Khuda Hafiz. Goodbye.
Goodbye.